Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Donovan Hardenbrook, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Smart Service Desk, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. We're going to be putting everyone on mute, so if you have some questions, please be sure to type them into the chat box that's in the lower right of your screen. I'm pleased to announce and introduce to you our presenter today, Thaddeus Crawford, also goes by the name TC. TC is our CEO at Smart Service Desk and is a proven leader in implementing enterprise information technology with deep expertise in service management. Prior to joining Smart Service Desk, TC spearheaded major strategic initiatives in the service industries with the Washington Post subsidiary, Cable One, Inside Enterprises, Direct Alliance, which is now called Ravana, and FedEx. His service delivery leadership roles have included service transformation and technology services, business operations, as well as business development. So with that said, with that introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to TC. As I said, I will be moderating time to time here, and we'll assist in the closing of the webinar as well. So with that, let me turn it over to you, TC.
Thank you very much, Don. I appreciate it. Like Don said, my name is Thaddeus Crawford. Everyone calls me TC. I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for all of you that are in different time zones. It's actually a pleasure to meet with you today. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things, and it's all about choosing IT service management solutions. And really the purpose of it is actually for from a non-IT management perspective. In my years of managing solutions and enterprises for the corporate environment, I've come to realize that there are a lot of things that an IT leader does, and I'll name a few of them. One of them is delivering IT services. Second one is figuring out what technology to use for the environment and for the benefit of the company, especially going forward into the future. Another one is helping and assisting users. As you all well know, that's very critical in sustained operation. And another big responsibility is actually financial manager for IT assets. One other thing that's really important is actually security on their minds. Really that's probably the most significant things today. If you think about all the issues in the newspapers, keeping the environment, the employees, and also your customers' data safe is probably one of the greatest responsibilities of an IT leader. I would also ask, and probably last but not the least, is that it plays a role of a business relationship manager. When I say that, technology is complicated, it's complex, and it's expensive. So one of the responsibilities of IT leaders, especially in your company, is to communicate with the business, ask what the impact, what the opportunity is, and how will technology help you get done some of the business objectives out there for the business. So having said that, we'll move right into our presentation. So there are a couple of interesting facts about service, and this is the first one that I'd like to show you, because in the businesses that we're in, profitability and growth are very important, but this all cannot happen with the idea of having great service. So here's a couple of neat facts, and some of these you may know, but I'm sharing with you just so that we can actually set the table for what we'll talk about today. Did you know that 85% of the companies believe that they provide great service? Well, the challenge is only 5% of customers agree with them. Here's another one that might be interesting to you. A 5% increase in customer retention can increase a company's profitability by 75%. And that was done by the research company called Bain & Company. 80% of your company's future revenue will come from just 20% of your existing customers. Now, we all know the 80-20 rule, and I'm not sure if the people at large came up with that or whether Gartner came up with that and everybody adopted that, but at least for sure we know that it's been quantified to be actually true about the 80-20 rule, especially when it comes to business. And the last one, probably the most significant one in terms of being impactful to the business, is that it costs 5 times more to get a new customer than it takes to actually hold on to a customer. So as you can see, the idea of service after a product or service is delivered to a customer is actually very, very important to the life of the business. Here's just a quick note about who we are. Our solutions bridge the gap between perception and reality. As we talk about how important service and support is after the sale of a product or service to your customers, really this is where it becomes important. Smart Service Desk, as a software as a service company, we provide service management solutions that allow simplified, standardized support tasks into one system of record for small to mid-sized businesses. So that's just a little bit about where we focus and where we believe is important for us to focus and help business with, out there in the world today. So our goal today are twofold. One, the first is, let's talk about considerations for selecting an ITSM solution. And I'll be quite frank with you. What we'll talk about today applies for any solution in your environment, especially for non-IT managers. The second thing that we'd like to accomplish is also translations. In the many years as a business relation management manager at the executive level, it's very important that we communicate, some common understanding about, what things mean in a very IT-centric world, especially given the amount of investment that companies make in IT. So we'll talk about those two things today, and hopefully you'll walk away with a better sense of, how to pick a solution, a software, some things to think about. And also the second thing is to understand some of the terminology that goes on, in the day-to-day business between IT and the business groups. So the first question we have is, what is service management? Well, it's a set of business practice activities, best practice activities that actually leverages the power of technology. And why? Important to support the processes. And the clear goal for this is actually hit defined service levels to meet customer expectations. That's the bottom line. That's what service management is. Now, in organizations, there are several layers which consist of plans and activities. And I put this in context so that you can actually see how services come into play with meeting some of the business objectives that a company has. So at the first layer, you actually have a business layer. And this is where all the strategies, determinations, and planned outcomes are done by executive or senior management. To support that, they have a number of different products that they go to market with, all right? And included in this is not only the sales process, but the support of these products over the life of that customer. The next layer that actually upholds that is actually your process layer. Really, what do you do internally? What activities are you performing to actually make a difference in how your services are delivered, and then that support mechanism happens when it comes to making those commitments to your customers that are very important to you. And then last but not least is actually the information technology layer. This is actually the technology underpinning of the processes that actually the set of activities and tasks and decisions that go on with supporting your services. So, as I frame it like this may be pretty obvious to you, and it should be, because really this is how functionally the business is stratified in order to move forward, especially in your very competitive markets. The last thing I wanted to show you was some terms that IT service management is associated with. And there are quite a few out there, but these are some of the popular ones. One is ITIL, COBIT, Six Sigma, ISO 2000, and capability maturity modeling. What's important to this, and the bottom line is that there's standards and the consistencies, and that means how are the right things done and done well in order to improve quality, meet or exceed compliance requirements that you may have, and at the end of the day, have great management capability. The next thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about current trends in service management today. And there are three main ones. The first one is SaaS for use business. As you can see from IDC, between 2013 and 2017, no more than double the use of SaaS-based applications for business. I think many of you may be undergoing a transformation using or adopting SaaS applications as it is today, even if it's simple as using technologies such as Salesforce.com or Workday. Those are some very popular ones out there in the marketplace today. The second thing, big trend, is actually quantifiable customer SLAs and feedback. As we've talked about, that service aspect, along with the products that you're selling in your market, becomes very important. Lynn Hunsaker from Customer Think actually has a nice closed-loop diagram that I think well typifies what goes on with respect to customer experience. If you have ability to measure the satisfaction from your customer, you can actually take the richness of that information and change on how you execute. In other words, how your process is designed and developed to support that customer experience. So really, as I said, it's really a closed-loop experience for your customer base. Here's the interesting part that we wanted to get to. The 7 areas that I think, in my mind, are very important should be considered by businesses or as such. And keep in mind, there's an IT speak, and this is the part I was talking about earlier, and there's also a business translation. So the first one is the total cost of ownership. At the end of the day, and you'll hear people call it TCO, right? And what that means, what does it really cost for me to actually have a solution to help me run my business or part of our business as a company? The second one is rate of adoption. Will my team use it? In other words, will they take to it, or will they just be comfortable with what they're using today? The third thing is ease of use. How fast can we get started using it? Very important, because it's all about ramp up. You know, everybody's got very difficult, very busy jobs. The question is can I take it and use it and continue doing my job as I was yesterday? The next thing is data migration and transformation. Big question everybody asks, do we need to have our old data moved into the new system? And we'll talk more about that. A big word, extensibility and scalability. Question that a business owner should ask of a particular function in the business is that, can my system grow with my needs? Next one are some big words as well, configuration and customization and development. I talked to a lot of businesses. One of the big things that come to mind is, do I have to call the vendor every time I change my processes or change what I want to do in order to do well for my customers? And the last one is IT governance. Do I need to get the IT department involved, especially with SaaS products today? And we'll talk more about that as we move through our presentation. Total cost of ownership. I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but there's a couple of things. From a technology standpoint, the big areas are decisions around whether it's a cloud or an on-premise solution. Another big consideration is integration into other applications, which is important. And then we talked a little bit about this, and we'll talk more about this, is data needs. So when you're looking at a solution, you say, really, how much does it cost me? There are a lot of considerations, and they'll be benchmarked against whether you're having a SaaS-based application installed or whether you're looking at an on-premise. When I say on-premise, you know, the company, IT, or yourself have bought the solution and actually has to go within your network there at the company where you're working. So here's some interesting ones, and I'll point out a few that I think are very interesting and typically people don't have a chance to think about. Obviously, everybody knows that licensing is important, but there's also the cost of data migration. What I've found is that the cost to move data for an organization from one application to the next one that they will be using in the future can be as time-consuming and as expensive as doing the application itself. Installation and setup, that pretty much goes for anything that, or any application or software solution that you may be putting in. Integration is a big concern, simply because, you know, our solutions and what you need to do is not an island. You actually need information from other parts of the company in order to do your job. We'll talk more about customization later. Recurring support fees happen. If you've got an on-premise solution, for instance, you may have annual maintenance fees. The maintenance fees are there to actually so they can support the application, entitle you to upgrades or improvements or security features that need to go into the application as you use it going forward. Training time and money is actually important. The difficulty of training or the ease of training makes a big difference. It's all measured in the time it takes to do it. Update and changes, the same for updates and changes. If you have a solution, for instance, that requires updating, then there may be a cost to it. It depends on your relationship and your agreement with your provider. Now, as opposed to SaaS solution, in SaaS solutions these days, there's not an update or a change fee every time they improve the application. What they will do is they'll actually charge you for an additional feature, potentially, but in terms of updating the application to make it a better platform or a better application for general use, they'll do that, and that's actually part of the delivery, part of the agreement that SaaS-based applications have. Another interesting one is named versus unnamed licenses. Now, the only time this comes into play is actually if you're an organization that has, let's just say, a call center, and you have, say, 2 shifts to cover service. You have 50 on each shift. Well, a named license means that everybody within your organization has to pay for a license. So if your licensing was $100 per seat or per person, then you're looking at 100 times 100 in order for the cost of that application. Now what they do have is they have what they call unnamed licenses. And that means that you can buy licenses for 50, so that first group actually uses that 50 license, and then when the second group comes up with the second shift, they'll use that same license that's associated with that desktop, where that person was working earlier that day before, or that shift before. Now, the difference in that is a name license, and I just use it as an example so you can get an idea. A name license will be $100 per user, but they may charge you at least $150 for an unnamed license. So it really depends on your needs. If you've got a static group of folks that actually do the same thing every day, and you don't have shift differentials in terms of different groups coming on to support your customers in a call center, then what I will tell you, then it's probably better to go with a named license versus an unnamed license because it will be expensive. Sometimes their services wind down fees. And what I mean by services wind down fees is that in some SaaS-based applications or cloud services, if you decide to change your service provider or decide to take it in-house, they may ask you to pay certain fees in order to do that. My best recommendation to you is actually think about that on the front end when you enter the agreement with your customer so that that's agreed to up front, because if you're leaving a cloud provider, they could make it very painful for you to leave in order to do that. I've seen in cases where it was so exorbitant that there was decisions whether to change vendors or not. So really think about that up on the front end and have that agreement when you first meet that vendor, enter into that agreement with that vendor. Vendor required upgrades. This one isn't interesting, and in all my experience, one of the things that a vendor will tell you, especially for on-premise solutions that actually have the applications within your organization versus a cloud-based solution, is that they will call and upgrade really a forklift. And what I mean by forklift, it's a brand new application that they want you to deploy, and they'll call it an upgrade. So my thought to you is that be sure, and the way you recognize this is that the amount of it costs to do the upgrade. That will be a telltale sign to let you know that this upgrade is really not an upgrade, is actually a forklift, because it's costing me almost as much as I put this in the first time. The last one is internal resource cost. That's fairly understood by most. There's an effort, a time and effort associated with the resources internally. One other thought is how you pay for it. Capital versus an expense process and impact. So capital item is one that, and it really a lot of this depends on your policies for financial management, and obviously your accounting and finance group has the understanding of policies with respect to that. But typically, an on-premise or an in-house solution that's within your network, within your infrastructure, that one actually could be classified as a capital item, which there may be a long process for getting that associated or getting that recognized or getting that accepted or approved in the organization. Now, SaaS or cloud-based solutions typically are classified as expense, simply because of the unit cost, and also too, there's really no build process within the organization. So again, it's really important to sit with your financial managers and ask them about the policies around capital versus expense as you're considering or being part of a team to actually acquire new software. The next one we'd like to talk about is rate of adoption, and this is all about, will my team really use it? Here's some considerations for your organization. The first one is service and culture. There are two things that happen when you talk about making a change or using new software, and that is mindset maturity. As a service-based culture, you have to really ask yourself, are we truly a services-based organization? Is that a name only? Or do we have the mechanism in place to ensure that the service commitments we make, we can actually deliver on? You have to ask yourself also, too, can you measure how well you're doing? And are you willing to say that, to commit to that to your customers, and by telling that, here's what I commit to you in terms of my service to you, right? A lot of that is around mindset, and a lot of it is around maturity. Some companies actually have different levels of maturity out there when it comes to service-based organizations. The next item is organization support. The decision to becoming more of a service-led based organization is based on two drivers, and one of them is executive sponsorship. That obviously is a top-down approach toward having the organization get behind the same effort for improving services consistently on behalf of your customers. Now, sometimes what I've seen in some organizations is where there's not executive buy-in or sponsorship, then some individual groups or functional areas take a proactive step in doing so. I've seen it many times, especially within IT organizations. One of them is and when you do that, the functional groups and your peer groups, is really important to have them involved in the process. You can actually take a proactive step to show senior management that's actually works and make a difference in terms of how you're executing as a group, but the benefit to the rest of the organization. So whatever path that you're taking or that you're on, it's really important that there's a couple things that you do is that participation inclusion. Very important for your team and also very important for your peers to have them involved. The next interesting term that's out there is called ease of use or usability. Very technical IT terms, but the question is, how fast can we start using it and using it well? Well, that depends, and there's some considerations, and the first one is user interface and experience. Today's, and especially a lot of software companies out there that were, if you will, born or actually came into existence to offering within the last 3 or 4 years, have some interfaces that are developed more like a web-based portal for its usability, versus some older legacy technologies really have been based on client-server type solutions, and you can actually tell that it's an older architecture and older user interface by the way that it's designed or set up. The other important thing to look for and to consider is personalization by role and responsibility. In other words, when I sign on as an employee, do I see what I need to see, or a customer, or if I'm a support manager, do I have the tools and the visibility and the type of functionality I need to do my job? Or if you're an administrator or even a vice president or director responsible for the overall performance or activities in your particular group, do I have a view that helps me understand that at a glance? Another thing is contextual. And what we mean by that is it obvious what I do next. In other words, as I start working through some of the functionality or some of the screens in order to capture information about a customer or interact with a customer, is what I do next obvious? Because what that will do is actually cut down on the amount of training necessary in order to get that particular person, for instance, a support person, up to speed. The next thing is the ability to change your processes in terms of action and escalation. We call it configurability. A lot of times, and we'll talk more about this, is that what does it take to change my application so I can make it better for my team, or we're ready to take on more capabilities so that we can become a lot more effective about what we do. And the last thing is training support. It's understood by all that training is the cornerstone, how well is it delivered, and what is the support mechanisms to help you, improve on the technology or the application that you're using. This is another area of interesting. It's all about data migration and transformation. The question is do we need to have our old data moved to the new platform? So I'd ask you a couple of things to think about, and that is that do you have baseline and benchmarks today on how well you're doing in terms of key performance indicators, leading indicators that tell you how you're doing and what you will do, lagging indicators, or even customer service surveys. They could be internal or external. Do you have a benchmark or a baseline for that, and are they coming out of your system today, right? The next thing is that have you been collecting this data? If you haven't been collecting the data, then maybe it makes sense to move forward and start fresh, right? Redefine what you want to do, what's important for you in terms of how you want to measure how well you're doing with your customers. In fact, how well you're doing as an organization. The next consideration, a question you need to ask is, have you been using the data collected? Now, I've seen a lot of organizations that collect data, but they haven't simplified it into a meaningful story as to what's going on so they can better manage their operations, especially in the face of the customers. The next question is, will your operations change after the solution in place? What typically happens is that you may be operating in one way today, and that could be limited. That'd be because of limitations of what your applications can do for you today. But when you get that opportunity to have a new solution, you're actually going to change the way that you're actually be able to operate as a business or as a function within a business. At this point in time, you have to ask yourself, will the data inputs and the data that I'm collecting will be the same type of data elements that I will have going forward? Because if they're not, or dramatically different than what you had before, then maybe it makes sense not to move forward. Maybe what it makes sense to do is actually benchmark or establish some baselines from all that time you've been collecting data, and for those collecting data, and for that time period, establish some baselines so that they would be part of your new solution going forward. And the last thing, which is really important, is at the level of effort to move your data from one system to another. If you do have a lot of data and it's important to you that you move that data over, then it's going to cost you time and money. And, you know, for a lot of organizations, it makes sense to do that. The data is critical for them, especially when it comes to customer data, you know, where historically it's important to reach back to understand or to reference. So, again, that's really an important consideration when we're talking about moving your data from your old system to your new system. Here's another term, scalability and extensibility. Question here is, can my system grow with my needs? Okay. Now, what's really important is that you have customer and vendor scale parity. That's what I call it. In other words, as I add more users or I need more capability, you know, will I only pay for what I need? Okay, and very important. And that's something that you know, as you're looking at software or looking to acquire software, you need to look at it. Does my cost scale with the capability of the number of the people that I use? And is it reasonable? And in most times, it's very important to leverage what you're doing with them to say that, hey, the more I do with you, you know, per unit, per application, you know, I should get a better price. So those are some of the levers you have in working with your vendors to actually, you know, really manage your costs or really find cost opportunities as you grow into using your new software. Okay. The consideration is ability to integrate. You know, on-premise solutions and also to SaaS solutions, you know, more times than not, require some level of integration with other solutions within your environment. We're going to talk a little bit more about that one in the next slide. Another one is all-in-one solutions. All-in-one solutions are great simply because you have everything you need in front of you. In other words, I have all my capabilities, and when I'm ready to use it, I can actually activate it for the benefit of my team or my company. Now, that's actually a great opportunity, a great capability. The challenge is sometimes in all-in-one solutions, they may not be what we call the best of breed. In other words, you know, I've got this CRM solution that works really well for me, and I've got an analytics package with it. But guess what? That analytic package is okay. I need more things out of it. So sometimes a best solution actually is better for a company. Another big area which is actually a big cost hit for customers is development versus customization versus configuration. The question is do I have to call the vendor every time I change my processes that are running on this application? Here's some considerations. Development. It is the need for skilled application or system engineers that actually have the ability to change how the solution works for you based to meet your business requirements. Customization is also to the requirement for needed skills on the application or systems engineer level, but it takes less time or a lesser skill set to make those changes in order to meet your business requirements. And then the third one is configuration. Really, the application is designed in a way that allows changes so that the application can be modified and you can actually use it without the need of skilled application or system engineers. So for the time and money, relatively speaking, development is an expensive proposition. It can be. Customization is not as expensive and not as time-consuming, and configuration, it would be reasonable. Now, in configuration, you know, ideally, the tool or the application is designed so that you can actually configure it yourself, which is your best opportunity for managing your costs and really saving a lot of time. Or sometimes, because it's configurable, it requires a little bit of a special skill set, and that actually is with the vendor. But the opportunity there is that your costs will still be fairly reasonable when you compare it to customization and development. IT governance. This is an interesting one because the question, especially if you're looking at SaaS-based applications, is do I need to get the IT department involved, right? And for every company that you have different policies or procedures or processes that actually say, hey, it may depend on budget, may depend on decision-making authority, and it may depend on the relationship you have with IT within your organization. So if we're talking about on-prem solutions, and that means putting your application or data inside the company, then typically there's a high level of involvement by your IT, internal IT organization. It includes project management, it includes a lot of systems engineers, application engineers, even security to make sure that it actually goes in right and works the first time that it's made available to the business. And obviously, when that happens, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges for the business, is it is subject to resources, priorities, and capacities. And inside your organizations, it will be subject to those types of considerations, and you may end up in a position where it may not happen when you want it, based on what the business can do from an IT standpoint. Now, the other opportunity, which is popular today, is actually SaaS or cloud-based solutions. I will tell you this, it is always a good idea to involve IT, and here's why. One, you will always need to connect internal systems, whether it's customer information, employee information, active transactions, or even a verification process. These are very, very critical. And the second thing that's really important is you want to ensure the safety of your data, but also to the data employed to your employees and also to your customers. I will tell you this, SaaS companies will downplay sometimes the level of need for the internal groups to be involved. And from my experience, I've seen where multiple contracts have been signed, but what it comes to find out was when the IT did get involved because of imperative, the contracts had to be canceled or significantly modified. So, my advice or my counsel to you is always get IT involved, and the earlier you do, the better. They would appreciate it, and because there's not as much effort required on their part, they'll be more than willing or glad. It is very important to do this because then you get their cooperation, but also too, they'd be very enthusiastic about not having another major project to put on the PMO list. So to recap, between IT speak and business translation, cost of ownership is all about what does it really cost, and the impact of that is a financial impact. Rate of adoption is all about will my team really use it, and that's about productivity. How fast can we start using it? When we talk about ease of use, it's a productivity impact. Data, do we need to have our old data moved into the new system? It can be a financial impact depending on the level of effort that takes. Extensibility and scalability, in other words, can my system grow with my needs? That's a financial impact. And then configuration, customization, and development, the dreaded, do I have to call my vendor every time I make a change to my processes? That can be a very significant impact depending on what type of software you're using or you decide to take. And then last, do I need to get IT involved? Yes, and that really is an organizational impact. There's really a tight bindings between IT and the business groups, and anytime you can get them involved as early as possible will make a world of difference in the combined success of both functions within the organization. So right now we're going to turn it back over to you, the audience, for any questions you may have, and then any comments from Don Hardenbrook from our group. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions in the chat right now, but if you feel like you have one, would you please type one in there? In the meantime, we often get a lot of questions from folks, so one that gets asked a lot is, are any of these considerations that were shown, or any of them more important than others? So TC, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I will. Let's talk back to that slide. I think from a financial standpoint, configuration, customization, and development can be a significant impact to the organization, especially if you choose on-premise software. And obviously that segues to total cost of ownership. It's one thing to actually buy a solution and day one the costs up to that, but if you look at the cost in order to maintain and improve, sustain, and add to that solution going forward, that actually can be a lot more expensive than it took to actually get you to the first date of using the solution. The other one from an organizational standpoint, I will have to say it's IT governance. The best thing that business can do, especially internally, is actually work well with the IT group. And at the same time, too, the IT group has to work well with the business functions in order to meet some of their needs. So I would say that probably are the top two for me. We talked about data migration and transformation, but I think those two are probably the most important ones.
Okay, thank you, TC. Another question here would be, given that we're talking to the business units, how do you justify the cost of buying a solution, in this case ITSM, but probably more broadly software solutions in general?
So from a business owner, from a non-IT manager standpoint, we talked about total cost of ownership. If you can help the group that's responsible for doing the selection with you provide as much business information, then you can help them both figure out what the ROI is. And at the end of the day, it's about putting an investment against a cost, putting your investment against an opportunity to see what it yields in terms of an opportunity, right, in terms of the investment yield. And at the end of the day, if you help them develop what the cost structure is, both on the business side, they'll come up with the cost side, you marry them two together, and then you say, really, with this solution, this is what the value is to the organization is. That's probably a really key thing to do, is develop a joint ROI.
Okay, thank you, TC. Actually, I have a question here from Philimbian. Apologies if I didn't say that right, but his question is, how does Smart Service Desk have an IT assets management and remote support?
So, I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
Go ahead and answer that one. He had another question before that, so go ahead.
Okay, so Smart Desk does have IT asset management as well as configuration management for organizations that have deployed our solution. And then remote support, well, if you're talking about from an organizational support, I think that's what you mean. We also support our clients remotely. Or if you mean that the remote support in terms of being able to extend the use of our application into a customer that you may have, we have the ability to do that as well, too.
Okay, and if we didn't answer that, go ahead and respond with another question. But he had a question before that, TC, and it was, how do you rate/evaluate the Smart Service Desk considering the explained 5 critical factors?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that. We are a cloud-based solution for our customer base out there, so your costs actually are managed very well in terms of per use per month. Rate of adoption, we've actually done a tremendous work around making sure that the use of it actually works very well with the customer's organization. We've designed the solution based on some feedback from a usability standpoint. Data migration and transformation, we have 2 techniques to be able to do that. One is, technically it's called a transfer and ETL process, or we have some simple capabilities for taking information that's in a spreadsheet or an Access database, and we can actually upload it into the new solution that you may have, right? Configuration and customization and development. From a configuration standpoint, I will tell you this, is that our solution is designed so that you as a customer can actually change the processes you have within your organization. We actually teach you how to configure the solution for yourself. And then once you have that, you don't need any more development or customization from us unless you're thinking about integrating into other solutions within your environment. Quick note on extensibility and scalability. Our solution is actually a complete solution across the framework for managing across the organization. As you add more users, you can actually do that over time, and also too, as you need more capability, as your maturity grows for managing your processes, you can actually add additional capabilities for that.
Okay, great. Thank you, TC. I don't see any more questions, so if you have one, please type it in here, but if not, we'll give you a few seconds here. Just while we're waiting for that, if we can go to the next slide, TC, that would be great. We're going to be doing some more webinars, so we'd like you guys, we'll notify you since you're on our list here, but here are the upcoming topics. One will be on service level management. How do you establish service levels with your customer? And then the other one is change management, which is a topic of a lot of misunderstanding, but how do you manage change when you're in the middle of it? So with that said, I don't see any more questions on here, but just for those of you who that did make it today, but we're going to be recording this in a webinar. Recording this webinar, and we'll be putting it on our website here. So if we have anything else, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. We'll be signing off.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.